the earth moved. It's a day when something deadly comes to Riverdale. Something leaving a trembling path of destruction. Wherever it burrows. Think you're brave? You won't be able to sit still on the day the earth moved.
Similar to how Misfortune Hunters decided to steal from The Last Crusade, this episode decides to steal directly from another movie, Tremors. Starting the episode, Archie is awoken by his father saying they need to do some family tradition that, like many episodes, is completely made up for this one and will never be heard of or mentioned again. This involves them wearing kilts, repeating a poem, and ringing a bell in Riverdale. Which, if we're to believe the rest of this episode, means that this long-running tradition has the Andrews being in Riverdale since its founding. Which, of course, isn't expressly stated, but would explain the red-haired scout during the time travel episode. However, for this to be true, it would mean that the settlers were also carrying a great big bell around with them. So points for trying, show, but in fixing one plot hole, you've just made another. The reason for this tradition is to keep a giant worm-like creature from burrowing in and around Riverdale. Which is where we start seeing all the Tremors references, including sound drawing the creature towards things like cars or people, making the creature burrow through a specific wall to try and kill it. Hell, the only thing missing is getting it to eat something and then making it explode. Because instead, this just gives us that the bell is rung and the creature buggers off back to wherever it's been. Until, of course, it comes round again. The problem is the episode borrows heavily from the movie Tremors and gives nothing back in terms of originality, and this is kept happening every 100 years or so. You'd think people would notice.
I don't believe it! You were telling the truth!
Along with that, how did they come into possession of a bell that could drive them off? And did they have it straight away? Because otherwise there would be no one left. And how did they find out it worked so that they knew to do it a second time? And why are Archie's family the only one who knows about it? Also, I realised that they must have been cursing Archie's name the first time it happened, since he was the one who led the settlers to Riverdale, at least according to the time travel episode. So for an episode that should have just stayed buried underground, it's been unearthed at number 12.
Attack of the 50-foot Veronica! She's big, she's beautiful, and she's deadly. This babe is taller than King Kong in heels. Is Archie man enough to handle the brazen brunette with the size 60 shoes? Attack of the 50-foot Veronica!
It was a long time ago at this point that I said during the shrinking episode that there was a growing episode. And finally, here it is. So Dilton makes an enlarging ray, which means I might as well stop there, because if you've been following this list from the beginning, you should know this story by now. But first, Veronica doesn't like Jughead because he's apparently too weird.
He's an absolute slob.
Nah, he's just Jughead. So have you finished your guest list for your big pool party?
Yes, indeedy.
So who'd you invite?
Well, not Jughead, that's for sure.
Now that the poorly done moral is set up, let's watch Veronica be a complete fucking idiot. Yep, she stuck her hand into a laser beam, like a child. Sometimes they just deserve what happens to them on this show. Similar to the shrinking episode, Veronica doesn't even notice, or is just too stubborn to notice, that she's slowly growing bigger. And this keeps going constantly, which makes me wonder what the hell the writers think a normal person's reaction is if they suddenly notice things like this happening.
Ow! When did you lower the roof of your car?
What?
Just drive.
Because neither in this episode or the shrinking episode did the characters notice until the plot decided they should. This continues as Veronica begins breaking things after she sees the whole world is against her own personal weirdness. But she quickly becomes redemptive of her actions after talking to Jughead, who just happens to be walking by. Recruiting Dilton, Archie, Jughead and Veronica try to find a way to reverse things. That way is in connecting an opening scene with Jughead and Betty trying to make a cake, where the sudden blast of cold air on it made it shrink. There is not enough techno-babble in the world to make this make sense. Basically, they're going to cool Veronica down, because that will shrink her like a cake. Now, obvious thing here, people are not cakes, and cold does not make a person shrink. But at least it does end out the episode. Unlike the Shrinking episode, this doesn't try to do anything with Veronica being big, and it doesn't feel as much like an adventure, so much as just the basic massive monster wrecks the town sort of plot. And unlike the Shrinking episode, the way it's resolved isn't anywhere near as explainable. Too much of this episode's time is spent first on the giant bug that is accidentally hit with the beam, which really does just feel like padding since it doesn't seem to add anything to this, and then Veronica's slow growth where she fails to notice anything at all, which no one in their right mind would do. The whole setup of Veronica disliking Jughead for being weird and then being the one who comforts her doesn't work due to the nature of these episodes. The fact they're self-contained and that Veronica never had an issue with Jughead until now makes it another plot-convenient episode, changing a character's personality to fit what's needed instead of it reflecting what they are. The easiest way to have done this would have been to have the opening show Jughead ruining several of Veronica's parties by being weird, thereby setting up exactly why Veronica doesn't want him there, with a little more gravitas than what the episode actually gives us. Even more so when you remember that the whole giant bug thing at first to pad out the episode where easily the relationship between Veronica and Jughead could have filled in. But since this episode ended up getting too big for its britches, it ends up at number 11.
It lives in the sewers. Something is lurking in Riverdale's underbelly, but what? Archie's got an appetite for mystery, but something's got an appetite for Archie. It's got glowing eyes, it's got sharp teeth, and it lives in the sewers.
This episode makes me wonder one thing. How quickly can I sum up an entire plot of one of these episodes? Jughead had a pet gator, Veronica flushed it grew huge in the sewer, Jughead finds it, it's friendly, and then it's taken away to live its life in peace. So I just summed up an entire 20-minute episode in under 10 seconds. What does that tell you? A lot of this episode just flows so slowly as it moves from plot point to plot point. It's just a long wait for little payoff. We already know what the monster is, due to the intro. Jughead's mourning for a pet that he's just suddenly had and is now gone, tipping us off even more in case you didn't even see it. Though oddly, the episode does the thing of, the monster finds Jughead's hat, which is dropped during a chase, but nothing comes of it. It's not what reminds the alligator of Jughead, and once the two reunite, it's not even mentioned. And the resolution to this is probably the speediest any episode ever gives. So once Jughead and the gator reunite, it immediately transitions into the monster being taken away by Veronica's father. Which makes me wonder why they didn't have the monster track Jughead down after being flushed. Have Jughead realize who the monster was and then try to keep/protect him from the others during the episode. Although I will admit that does sound a little like the movie they did for the series Doug, which wasn't great, but they've ripped off movies before, so really it wouldn't have been anything new. But while this episode can try to stay afloat all it likes, it's gotten flushed down here to number 10.